Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and ask all of the questions you have about anything and everything trans-related to two trans people. So we will be happy to take all your questions, whether you are, maybe a questioning your own gender and you kind of have some questions there, or maybe you think trans people are a problem for a healthy society. We should explore that. And we're here to do that with you. I am your host, Arden Hart, and with me today is the lovely, always amazing, doing so many incredible things, Josie. Josie, what's up? Oh, we got you.
Hi. I know, right? Hi, I was distracted by chat already. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. I haven't been here in a long time, so it's nice to be back on, say hello, and have some fun today.
Too long. So I'm sure you're doing too many things to even capture because you're always doing too many things. But we'd love to hear what's been going on with you and give us all a little update. What's on all the amazing things you're doing for trans activism.
Yeah. Actually, I just got elected to be the vice president of the Transgender American Veteran Association, or TAVA for short. So that was something that happened recently. And then I also got elected to be the vice chair of the Suicide Prevention Resource Center's Lived Experience Committee, which is great. And I helped coordinate an endorsement for presidential for Biden with all the other national organizations that happened about a few months ago. So don't get mad at me right now. But no, it's been absolutely great. I actually got to hang out with Angelica Ross because she's running for office soon. So we're like besties now. It's great.
Oh my God.
So no, it's been a lot of work. I'm just ready for the year to end. It's just so much. I lobbied on the Hill to fight for veteran gender affirming care benefits, because they're trying to remove those. I can go on and on and on.
I'm sure.
I presented an award to Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, who did the filibuster for Nebraska.
Right.
It's been wild. I've been on adventures. That's why I haven't been online very much. I've been too busy touching grass.
I'm jealous.
So thank you for pulling me back in,
That's right.
Getting connected with everybody.
Gotta get you off that grass, back online.
Yes,
well,
please.
We're so glad you could take time out of your schedule to be here because we love having you here and you are so valuable to the trans community in general. But honestly, we love you on this show. So glad to have you back. So as always, we do our polls here at the beginning of the day to kind of, ease us into some of the current events and maybe kind of prompt a few calls if people want to talk about those specific things. So we're going to talk about last week's poll. Last week's poll was, is voting Joe Biden the exact same as voting for Trump? 6% said yes and 94% said no. Now, not all of our audience is terminally online. Not all of our audience watches this show. So it's not surprising to me that most people were like, obviously, those things are not the exact same. But the reason we did this poll was because, in Biden's response to the Israel-Palestine conflict, a lot of people have been kind of voicing the opinion that maybe they're not going to vote for Joe Biden because they're disapproving of his handling of the situation and saying that Biden and Trump are essentially the same. And I'm someone who's pretty passionate about politics and electoralism. And I think that while I am totally on board for, criticizing Biden fairly for his handling of the situation, I think it's extremely naive to pretend that they're the same and that their outcomes for the country and the people living in this country are going to be the same. And so, I just kind of wanted to prompt this question to our audience and maybe start some conversation. And what do you think, Josie?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking, because, I was a Bernie delegate for both presidential election cycles, national Bernie delegate. And, I actually, as a Bernie delegate and as a California delegate, signed many resolutions that were in support of Palestine, right? And making sure that make sure that we're taking care of the humanitarian crisis that has been happening in Palestine for decades upon decades now. So it is interesting because calling for a ceasefire is now seen as like a thing that is like negative. I will say that Biden just recently came out and said there needs to be a pause in what's going on in Gaza, which is something, right? We're happy, but I will say this. Obviously, I'm still going to vote for Joe Biden because Donald Trump has already vowed to basically remove gender affirming care. He's not going to do much better. We cannot forget that Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem in the first place. That actually started a lot more fervor, and actually that caused a loss of life when that happened. So we can't be under any illusion that Trump would be somehow better when it comes to these conflicts. But I will say this, right? It was a very sobering, right? As somebody who actually coordinated and helped and made sure that large queer organizations across the country, HRC, Equality, PAC, and the National Center for Transgender Equality, to get them to actually endorse Biden. And now seeing that, it was very sobering because I never voted for Biden in the primary, right? I voted for him in the general, but I did not vote for him in the primary. And what this did was it reminded me on why I didn't vote for Biden in the primary. Although I still voted for him in the general, I think it's valuable to be able to be like, okay, let's not get too starry-eyed about our political figures. Let's remember that we still need to hold people accountable. And in the moment of things, obviously we all have emotions and we're super angry, and rightfully so, because things are happening. But we have to remember that he is changing his dialogue now. Things are public opinion starting to shift, and we have to remember what I didn't like about Biden originally is he's a political weather vane, right? He puts his finger in the air and he's like, oh, this is the way the climate is shifting, so let me say what I need to say.
Sure.
And is that better than, Trump, who kind of just goes in his direction that is most negative? Yes, but we can at least sway Biden back and forth. So it's super sobering. It's super frustrating. I'm glad to see that people are still feeling that Joe Biden is a better choice than Trump, according to this poll. But we have to be able to put sobering looks onto things and make the best decisions for the people that are being most marginalized now. And when it comes to Joe Biden and Trump, like, there's no comparison. And we can't forget that, but we also can't forget where our roots are and why we're upset in the first place. So we can continue to hold people accountable, so politicians that we do elect in the future actually don't make these types of mistakes again.
Yeah, totally co-signed all of that. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add. I think that was beautiful. Let's leave it on that beautiful note.
A lot of thinking on that one.
Yeah, no, it was great though. It definitely, I think, was an even more educated summation of kind of what I've been feeling on the topic. I mean, and this is why we bring you on the show. You're so amazing. So this week's poll. So I have a little explaining to do. We're gonna get into it. This week's
Sorry, my
poll.
partner's in the back.
No worries. This week's poll is: should trans people correct strangers who publicly misgender them? Now, I have a little note thing, so I want to give you guys some context to what's going on. So, there's been a viral video going around Twitter and TikTok. Lily Tino is a TikToker who has almost 300,000 followers on TikTok. And apparently I don't follow this person, but she regularly goes to restaurants doing live streams, testing their food and stuff like that. And she recently posted a compilation of all the times that she got misgendered by wait staff. I'm sure it wasn't all the times, but it was a collection of times. And I will admit I have some issues with the video and certain things that happen in the video, but that's actually not what the topic of conversation publicly has been. So I'm kind of gonna like shelf that. A video that she originally posted has over 10 million views on TikTok right now. So I'm sure she's getting swarmed with hate. And that's not even accounting for how many views it's gotten on like multiple viral Twitter posts. Basically, the subject of the conversation has been this trans woman some people think, you know, doesn't pass or whatever, and that's the reason she's getting misgendered, and that her correcting wait staff and asking to talk to managers and things like that is unreasonable, because she shouldn't have an expectation that people gender her correctly or whatever. Now, if you watch the video, while again, I said I do have some issues with certain things that happen in the videos, largely, I think everyone in the videos handles things pretty responsibly. They misgender her. She says, hey, actually, I don't go by sir. I go by she, her pronouns. And it kind of hurts my feelings when you misgender me. And usually the wait staff or the manager goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And that's the entirety of the clip. To me, that seems like kind of like the ideal of what should happen in those situations. Obviously, I don't want people getting misgendered ever, but if they are going to get misgendered, that's kind of how I want the situation to go, right? They express calmly, hey, that's actually not how I identify myself, and it kind of hurts my feelings that you would do that. And people say, oh, I'm sorry. And that can be the end of it. And we all move on with our day. I think there's also an added layer that I'm genuinely shocked that anyone would look at this person and ever decide to use the term sir. Regardless of how you gender this person, like, I feel like if I walked across this person and I don't think I would be confused about their gender, but even if I were, I would be like, definitely not going to use honorifics like sir for this person. Like, that seems like that should just be clearly off the table. But yeah, it was kind of a conversation. A lot of people saying, you know, like, again, she shouldn't be correcting people. She shouldn't have that expectation of people. And, you know, it's a public situation. It's kind of like inappropriate to do so. I just kind of felt like this is really strange to me because I feel like this is like the ideal. Calmly correcting people and moving on should be how the situation gets handled. It should be how mature adults react to the information that they may have hurt another person. Yeah, I don't know. I know you said you hadn't seen the video. We talked a little bit in the pre-show, but you've seen some of the comments. Do you have thoughts on kind of what's going on there? Oh, we got you. You're muted again. Sorry.
Sorry, I was trying to shield you from my partner having a meeting on the other side. No, you know what I was thinking was like cis people have to deal with this all the time as well. Like, you know, like people who aren't trans, they get misgendered in public, and then it's like, oh, by the way, it's not man, it's sir, whatever. That happens all the time, and no one ever makes a big deal about that, right? It's been happening since the beginning. You know, I think cis people cared about their pronouns way more back then than what trans people did in the past. And what I think is really frustrating is the way that she came about it, because I haven't seen the audio of the video, but I saw like the subtext because it was late at night and I didn't want to turn it on because the words. But you know, it is just like, actually it's this, and you know, it's visibility, right? It's visibility to being like you just said, why are people using sir or ma'am or whatever? It's like, hi, how are you? Is a much, I think, a better way of doing the honorifics, in my opinion. It's just like, who cares about those honorifics unless they say, hey, I'm Madam blah blah blah. But you know, it's just how people live their lives, and people are just, and I'll just say it, when people see this video and are upset by it, they're mad at their existence. They're mad that they have to actually be polite. They're mad that this is actually happening, and this person's just like, hey, by the way. And you know, and I say this all the time about like passing, right? Is like, I think more people pass than people think they do, in general, when it comes to trans people, because I'll tell you, society itself is pretty oblivious to the other human on the other side of you, right? They're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their hair. They're thinking about the way they look. They're thinking about all of these things. And I hope it's, are you hearing me fine? I want to make sure I'm not too distorted.
We got you. We can definitely hear her in the background, but it's all right. I'll put a noise gate up for it's okay.
I apologize for everyone. But basically, what most people, when they see somebody, they look at how they're presenting, right? That's just naturally what people do. They don't even look people in the eyes. When's the last time a random stranger actually had an eye-to-eye contact conversation with you? Very few. So most people don't go around thinking other people are trans, and so because of that, I think most people are gendered in the manner that we want to be gendered. But in these situations, I think that those waiters and those managers were just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, because they were in their own little world and they didn't even pay attention, right? They're
Right.
just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then they know, and then they just move on with their world. And that's how it goes for the people in the moment. The people on the outside, though, that are trying to comment on how somebody politely had a conversation with somebody, like, they can get over themselves. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Like, they're just trying to be assholes, and they just don't want us to exist in a space, and they don't want us to even say anything about it when we do.
Yeah, I think that's super accurate. I mean, normally, like my first reaction to this was I don't even know why this is like so viral or why people are commenting on this, and I was tempted to not even bring it up because people were so it's so viral. Like I said, 10 million views just on the TikTok video, not counting the engagement we're seeing on multiple different Twitter posts of this video. So I figured it was, I think, a good idea to bring it up because I feel very similarly. It really seems like people are just angry that a trans person is like just asking for respect and dignity in the public space. And like there are certain things where like she requested ahead of time that like the wait staff, because she's doing this live stream, that they not use "sir" or whatever. I do think, so kind of what you were saying, like I think a lot of the times for these wait staff, it's probably going to be difficult for them to even like keep track of that. Like they probably know that they were told that, but they aren't even putting together that that person was who they were warned about. Like it's just such an on the moment thing. But that doesn't mean that she isn't right to be hurt by it and not right to be like, hey, like I don't like to be called that, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that. And it's really that simple. And I think in the long run, it probably could be a good thing for the trans community in the sense that there is someone who is publicly out there showing that, hey, you don't have to, uh, like pass by, I don't know what society standards, because she, as far as I'm concerned, she passes. But you don't have to pass by whatever this weird societal standard is to be like, hey, I don't want to be disrespected in public. Like, you can just be who you are and advocate for yourself to not be disrespected, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, so that was just kind of giving that probably
I
way more
agree with all
attention
that.
and oxygen than it deserves. It's just crazy to me that this got so viral. So many people were so upset that this trans woman was like defending herself. But anyway, you guys can go vote on that poll.
Yeah.
Should trans people publicly correct people who misgender them? I think pretty obviously, like, yeah, I think most mature adults can handle that. But I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm totally
absolutely.
detached from society or something. Who knows?
By the way, I had my noise gate off, so we probably won't hear my partner anymore. I was
Oh,
so
okay.
wondering why you heard it so clearly. It was like, wait, there's something off. So I fixed the setting on my computer, so we should be good now.
No worries. Cool. All right. So we have two callers on the line. So we're just gonna hop right into it. First up, we've got Eddie in Washington. Pronouns are he, him. Eddie, you're on the line. What's going on?
Hello.
Hi.
I just have a quick question about transgender people in sports. Now, I'm all for it, but I have a huge Christian family that is totally against it, and I don't know how to argue it because they bring up things like Serena Williams, how she claimed that she couldn't compete with the low tier men in tennis, and just that biological stuff going on there. So I was just wondering, how do I argue that? Like, is there peer-reviewed papers I can refer to?
Yeah, so I would love to jump in here. So I will say this: I have conservative family members, and one thing to remember is when you're trying to bring up facts and evidence, they'll just pivot to something different. So something that, you could bring up all the studies in the world, talk about, when you compare trans women to cis women of equivalent height and weight, like it's the same after 2 years. We have all that data. All that information exists, and it's getting stronger every day. But what I've realized is more effective in these type of situations is to start with shared values. And what do I mean by shared values? Well, shared values such as, do you think it's important for kids to have access to sports and team sports, right? Like, of course, like if you start there, it's like, well, yeah, of course, people should have access to sports because, access to sports builds team building, it's fitness and all of those type of things. So when you start with like those levels of values, then you can start working backwards of like, so when do we stop preventing these people from being able to participate in sports, right? So you can start going and you want to try to get away from the words of fairness, right? Because fairness will always bring in those random anecdotal evidence pieces of a person that is maybe an exception to a rule, and that's always what is going to eventually brought forward. What you want to focus on is, like, first off, you want to have freedoms, right? Those are shared values that a lot of conservatives have. So you want to have the freedom of access. You want the fact that when we're talking about these edge cases, we're really talking about like elite professional athletes. So when you're talking about elite professional athletes, even the collegiate level, the sports themselves already regulate this and have been letting trans people into their sports for decades, right? The Olympics is one of them. They've been letting people in from 2003. But the conversation you have to focus is about high schoolers and junior high people, right? And elementary school kids. These are not professional athletes. And a lot of times when you're talking about, hey, don't you want these kids to have access to team sports, is usually a better place to start than the point of ground where they're wanting to start, which is, it's not fair. We're talking about this one edge case of this edge case, rather than the huge group of humans that aren't the most athletic humans in the world and just want to play freaking a game of touch football. Why? Like, who cares, right? And in most settings, it doesn't really matter. And when you're talking about high school and junior high, we have the systems in place, such as puberty blockers, for example. Some schools require that the children or the minors be on puberty blockers, or they're already on some type of hormonal transitional care. So there's already those things in place. So I always say that when you're trying to have these conversations, try to avoid it. I'm the data girl, right? Like, I'm US Trans Survey. I have tons of data. I have it in my back pocket. But I tend to have more conversations about values with people than the specific nuanced piece of study that will prove your point, because that's really not what they're arguing, right? They're arguing about, I don't want to have trans people in the sport of their choice, right? And that's really not what the argument should be. The argument should be, where do we make it where the most trans people have fair access to sports so they can better improve their physical lives and mental health?
Yeah, I think that's great. The only thing I really have to add is, like, I think the approach I've used a few times has been talking about, even if you kind of accept their premise that, people assigned male at birth just are always just going to dominate in every sport, right? That's not going to be true of every single individual. Like, things that might be true about populations aren't always going to be true of individuals. And if you are planning on banning an entire category of people on what some individuals in that category might do, that is just, like, by definition, discrimination of that group of people. And even if we accept, again, their premise that maybe people assigned male at birth do have some sort of competitive advantage, but then we acknowledge that, there are these individuals who maybe wouldn't and ought to compete, with their gender. It seems to be at that point, and we're also seeing, women who are competing at an extraordinarily high level and maybe outperform all of their peers. Perhaps the categories of athleticism that we have, being split by gender, is a mistake, and that perhaps the categories for sports that we need to start introducing that would actually implement fairness would have nothing to do with sex or gender, and might actually be about your height or your weight or some other category that is actually statistically correlated with your ability to compete in that sport at a certain level. Yeah. Also,
Eddie, do you have oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was
No.
just going to see if Eddie had anything to say, but you weren't finished with your thought. Go ahead.
no,
Arden.
no, that's good. Let's turn it over to Eddie.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just curious because I really care about, especially one of them. He's a cousin of mine, but he's more like a brother. But because he has such a strong stance against transgender people, and he's even expressed sexist values, but we've been so close for so many years, and since I walked away from the church, like, my values have changed, and my morals have changed, and I want to keep him in my life, but it's so hard for me to not judge him based on those values that he holds. So is it possible to continue to have a relationship with, people like that, you know?
Man, that is like the
That's a hard one.
question, right? I
Yeah.
think I think you can absolutely have relationships with people who have very different values than you. I think you have to, though, I think have an honest conversation with that person about like, hey, we have some severe value disagreements and I really value our relationship. And I think for the good of our relationship, it might be the best that we stop addressing this topic when we're together at
Hmm.
all. And well, I know for some people, and even for me, often that's just like an incompatible thing. I'm like, I have to talk about my feelings. I can't just put it away. Um, I think, like, so, like for example, with my father, we do not get along, and we have been in the past year kind of able to re-engage, but it has to be very surface level. And it's just been a thing that we've communicated that like, hey, we are not going to be able to have a meaningful, deep relationship because our values are so incompatible. But I really, value my little brother and you, and I want to be able to have us all have an integrated life together so that, as he's developing, he doesn't think that I don't care about the family or whatever. And so it's best for our relationship that we just sideline this entire category of ideas. But I also think it's totally valid if you are like, I can't be friends with somebody who just really stands in such stark opposition to my values. I'm just trying to answer your
Hmm.
question. Can it be done? Absolutely. I think we've all done it with family members or friends at one point or another. But I also think it's totally valid to be like, I've loved you like a brother, and this is really difficult for me. But unfortunately, we have grown so far apart that I don't see us, being able to be friends in the same way anymore. And that could be an opening point for a really meaningful conversation too. I don't know what the outcome would be, but Josie, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't jump right into the ultimatum. Like, right, like it's like, hey, you believe this, or I don't really want to hang out with you. And I always call it have a genuine sense of curiosity, right? Because you already know
Hmm.
where you're opposed, right? You're just like, okay, I am for trans rights in every way it shows up, and this person isn't there yet, or they won't get there, right? And where you got to figure out is like you start asking probing questions, such as, what are your fears about trans people? What if the worst case scenario happens, right? And really start digging in and explore why they believe the way that they believe, right? Just keep asking like question after question after question before you actually start getting into your belief set, because then you can kind of see where the like moral foundation is. And then once you can find that moral foundation, then you can make the choice, is it worth cracking through that foundation, or is it worth to just step away because it's not a situation that's going to better serve you? I have this conversation with my mom and my family all the time. My biological father disowned me, right? And I hope it doesn't get to that point, right? Because I think that when you're really addressing somebody's unfortunate point of views, I'll put it politely, you really want to dig in where that's coming from, because if you can figure out where it is, then maybe you can go from there. Because if you were I was raised Christian, I was raised in a conservative area, I was raised in rural Texas, right? And so for me, I have the benefit of like understanding a rural Texan's belief set on their conservative values. And I think you can use that to your advantage because you've already shared that. And I always like to go with, rather than saying my values are different than yours, I like to say that all of our values are kind of universal, right? Like, and I use like, we want everybody to be healthy. You don't want people to suffer harm. Like, you don't like, once you're out of those realms of values, I think that's where the problem. If somebody says, I don't care if somebody gets harmed, yeah, that's a different value set, right? But that's different. But I think if you can start with like, hey, like you agree that trans people shouldn't be like murdered and wiped off the planet, right? And like just try to figure out where that is. Where on the line of spectrum is the transphobia? And I bet you would have a better roadmap on where you want to proceed next. But I'm
Mhm.
sorry that you're dealing with this, and I appreciate you trying to salvage in a sense and try to better educate your family member, because I think that's incredibly important for visibility, because Arden and I can't have this conversation with your cousin, right? And
Mhm.
you may be the last person that will help maybe shake this person's point of view to being like, maybe I don't understand it and trans people should just exist, right? Because if we can get them there, that's fine, right? Like, it's like, okay, trans people should exist. They should enjoy every type of freedom that people should have. I'm just still having problems dealing with somebody that's trans in my space. Okay, there's a deep level of transphobia there, but at least they're not trying to remove my access to healthcare, and that's somewhere to put it. So it's a judgment call, and I really appreciate you taking the thought and thinking about this. And if you want to do you think that any of this may work? Have you done any of this work already, or how do you feel about it going forward with this particular relationship, or at least future conversation?
Yeah, we got in a pretty big disagreement the other night, and a lot of it stems from his Christian belief system. And I think cracking that could set a domino effect, but cracking that, as everyone knows, is extremely hard to do. So, yeah, I guess I don't want to address that because that is extremely personal for him especially. So,
Ah,
yeah, I guess I'll just start. I took a bunch of notes from what you guys have
great.
said, and
Aw.
I guess I'll start looking at talking about, especially focusing on the children. That is really smart because we all have, me and Tam, we have children that are playing sports, that are in school, so I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. You want you because even with the Christian value, you can still say, "Hey, we want kids to be safe," right? Like, and I
Exactly.
think that's a great place to start. Start with a shared value, right? Bond with
Hmm.
something first, and then start to mushroom out from that point of view. Because if you start on common ground, it doesn't start hostile, right? And I think a lot of times what we do is we kind of start at the opposite ends and try to pull people into our realm rather than going and meeting on a common ground, saying, okay, we both agree with this. Great. All right, great. This will be the foundation of our conversation. And we'll just try to move out and figure out how and what policy or what objective better matches the shared value that we started at the beginning of this conversation. As you could see, I've done a lot of messaging, and I'm actually working on trying to get messagings, particularly around sports. So I'm really happy that we got to have this conversation, and I hope that it works for you, because moving people in the middle, or moving people that are slightly to the right of the middle, is a very difficult task, and it's all about how we approach it, because if you push it the other way, then that person will go to the other way and stay there for a lot longer. So thank you for threading that needle and taking this with extreme care.
Okay, you guys are awesome. I don't want to take up any more of
Yeah.
your time, so
No,
Awesome.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Eddie. I
Great call.
appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day.
yeah, yep, me too. Appreciate you.
All right. So I do have some housekeeping to do real quick. Uh, we have open lines though. Before I do that, the number is 720-619-2288. There's also a web link in the description if you are international and you are trying to avoid those tolls. Toll free in the U.S. So yeah, you can get those calls, and we have open lines for you. So get those calls in. But I want to remind everyone that while Transatlantic is the best show on the line, objectively, there are some other shows that if you really have nothing to do with your time, you could check out. For example, we've got the Sunday show with Matt and Jimmy, where they primarily take religious, Christian versus atheist sort of calls. Uh, on Monday on Skep Talk, Forrest Valkai will be hosting with a undetermined guest thus far. This Tuesday on Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock, we will have Footless Joe. And next Wednesday on The Hang Up will be Matt with Eve Was Framed. Love Eve so much. So glad to have her back on the network. And then next week, it looks like it's supposed to be Katy and I, the OG team, back again right here on Takis. So that is your week of shows coming up. And the best way to support the network is to subscribe over on Patreon, patreon.com/calltheline. We have officially started to pull the threads together to make LineCon happen. So if you want to help support that and make it real, or maybe even show up yourself, definitely support us over on Patreon. We would love to see you there. Yeah. All right. So we have another trans sports call. Topic of the day. All right. So we're going to bring on Brandy in Massachusetts. Pronouns are she, her. Brandy, you are live on the line. What's going on?
I am doing well, and I'm excited to talk with the host about transgender women in sports.
Awesome. So what is your question, Brandy?
Well, I am a transgender woman. I'm 51 years old, and I compete in sports, and I'm also an activist. And I'm not sure where I draw hard lines on where I should fight my battles for transgender women in sports. Which sport should I back away from fighting that battle? Which sport should I press on and say, absolutely, I'm fighting very hard for trans women to be in this sport? And with my activism, I'm very clear on most other aspects of transgender issues. And just even as an athlete, I'm not 100% clear. I just want to get Arden and Josie's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think part of the issue with sort of this problem is while we do have a lot of data on, how transition affects athletic performance and things like this, there's not a lot of data on like specific performance in specific domains of sport. There is some, and there's some interesting findings from that, but it's maybe not as conclusive at this point in time as we would want it to be, despite the fact that there are some aspects that are conclusive. I want to be clear, transition has a very heavy impact on your physiology and your ability to compete in sports. But there are some people in certain domains of sport who went through male puberty who might theoretically maintain some advantage because everybody's different and everybody's going to react to hormone therapy and puberty totally differently. I think kind of like what Josie was talking about shared values is a great place to operate. But yeah, I don't know if talking about individual sports is the way to go. That's kind of why I've often talked about, this kind of notion that while things may be true at a population level, we have to remember that that doesn't necessarily apply to individuals within the population. And so saying that, oh, trans women might statistically have an advantage in this sport, let's say, even if that's not true, let's just like hypothetically, that doesn't necessarily mean we should ban the entire group of trans women from that sport, right? Because there are going to be individuals who are not going to have an advantage, who might really want to play that sport, who are going to be banned from it for literally no reason at that point. And that would just be discrimination. So I think we need to sort of refine our systems to better evaluate what it is we're looking for from athletes that would make for fair competition and what exactly, who exactly might qualify for that. And to be fair, this has already been done in a lot of cases, right? Like the IOC already has very clear guidelines on who can compete. And in all of that time, I think, is it one trans woman has qualified, and then she didn't even actually place in the competition, and it was weightlifting. She was beat by I think it was 11 other people. So it's difficult to know, even this is why I struggle, because I think I've seen some stats that might suggest that some trans women who've gone through male puberty might still maintain an advantage in running or something, right? But even if that's true, that doesn't mean that banning trans women from running sports is the logical conclusion from that. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, but Josie's doing all this political messaging stuff, so I'm sure she has more valuable things to say. Oh, you're muted again.
Okay,
Does
no,
it
you're
mute it?
fine, Arden. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm good. I'm still here. So one, I would like to take a step back, right? You said you're an activist, right? And I think as our natural instinct of activist is to kind of go into the fray, right? We're just like, oh my gosh, there's a violation of human rights of like this trans people in this specific segment of this fight, right? But we have to take a step back and look at the forest, right? And the forest is the entirety of trans rights in the United States, right? And what the Republicans are very good at doing, and I'll just say it's Republicans, what they're really good at doing is they're really good at having people focus on the one tree in the forest and say, look at this rotting tree. It is so bad, and this one tree is the whole forest is falling apart. And even though everything else could be completely fine and everything's okay. So what we're seeing is it's a tactic. It's a messaging tactic that the Republicans are trying to do to get you talking about the sports and talking about the edge cases, right? They want you to talk about the most extreme case, so then we ignore the dozens of children that are not getting access to junior high sports, elementary sports, and high school sports, right? People who aren't competing to be any, massive professional athlete. So we have to realize that we don't want to fight on their ground. They're going to try to say, oh my gosh, look at this, that most Americans agree that trans people have an unfair advantage in sports, and they're going to pull out a poll and they're going to say, look, what are you going to say about this? Can you prove this wrong? They're trying to get you into that fight. The best thing to do is pivot and say, look, we understand that public opinion of trans people is still being fought out. We understand that Americans still don't understand their trans neighbors. We know, just like we did in marriage equality, that people, when we were starting to win the fight for marriage equality, anger against queer people went up, right? Even though we were winning the fight perceptively, the polling still showed that we were losing, and then eventually we ended up winning that fight as people became more familiarized with queer folks, right? So when you start talking about same-sex marriage, what do they focus on? They're focused on, exposing people to same-sex relationships is going to corrupt the children's mind. If we allow this, then it's going to allow bestiality. And they start focusing on these very, very weird arguments of like, if we and now we can compare that with the sports argument. Oh, if we let trans women in sports, it's going to destroy women's sports as a category, right? They take these massive claims, these tiny little claims, that to completely discredit an institution such as the women's sports institution, right? Which isn't accurate. It isn't correct. And this has already been settled in almost every major professional sports organization in the country. Even professional boxing in the state of Florida, that has the most stringent requirements against trans women, where you have to be post bottom surgery for 3 years and be on hormones for 5, right? There's still that's still a requirement that's still allowed to let that trans person in. So why don't we let the experts who actually administer the sport actually make these decisions? The only thing that we need to do as a government is to make sure that there's no exclusion, right? To make sure that people don't have access to that sport, because that's where the discrimination comes in. So when you're having these activist conversations with people on the ground, they're trying to have an argument with you on the thing that they know you don't have the most ground with, because they think that this is going to be the edge case that allows discrimination against trans people full cloth, right? I always say pivot to the rights of people to access team sports, pivot to the fact that this isn't affecting most Americans, pivot to the fact that not one single scholarship has ever been won by a openly trans athlete. And, these are the things that you're going to be able to win ground on. And arguing about the nuance of data is never going to be able to win this fight, because they want to fight with you on the edge hypothetical case. So don't fall for the bait.
Josie,
Don't fall for the bait.
Josie, I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off, but you're keep
No,
going.
please.
You're not letting me come in.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize.
Appreciate you and thank you for sharing all that, but it's kind of missing the mark of what I'm getting at, please let me finish. My
Mhm.
activism goes beyond me just talking with other people. I'm also an athlete. I'm a senior
Okay.
citizen. I participate in senior activities. I'm 51 years old. Please do not cut me off. I'm going
What?
to finish this
Brandy.
thought, then I'll let you speak again, Josie.
Brandy,
What
well,
I am
okay, no,
saying
actually,
is
Brandy, I'm going to
part of
stop
my
you right there.
activism.
Brandy, actually, I'm going to stop you right there because Josie was literally not talking either of the times that you said, please don't cut me off, Josie. Also, I'll remind you that this is our show where people call in to get our host opinions on things. So while I appreciate
Apologize,
that you
Arden.
want
I
to talk and
apologize.
while I appreciate that you want to talk and share your opinion, and I'm going to let you finish, I don't really appreciate the disrespect of the host. So you can go on, but please keep that in mind.
My apologies. I did not mean. I I was trying to get my thought across, and let me start. Let me take a step back. I apologize. My activism is about normalizing transgender people across all social things. And part of playing sports is part of being human. And I play sports. And also as a transgender activist, when I compete, I'm being face to face with other people saying, now they're confronting me as an athlete. At this Massachusetts Senior Games, I have 6 gold medals in cycling. So I'm not side, I can't really pivot from that issue is my point. My point is I have to face it head on. I'm a trans athlete who does cycling, and I also do billiards. And in both of these sports, playing pool and cycling, 100% of the people I compete with have no idea that I'm trans.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
I'm a little lost,
when they
Brandy.
do find out I'm trans, that is going to be a big part of my activism. Is I am normalizing people who play pool, who do cycling, who do lots of sports, and we just live among everyone. We don't have to announce that we're trans. We don't have to make it a big deal. But when I am confronted with that, it's I want your thoughts of what should I say to people that about my athleticism.
So, Brandy, I'm a little lost. I'm going to need your help on getting us on the rails because you called in and you asked the
Yeah.
question, where should the lines be drawn on transgender sports? That's what I have in the call notes. That's basically what you said at the beginning of the call. And I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, that is essentially what both Josie and I addressed in the first portion of the call. And if you feel like we missed the mark, that's fine. But
I,
when you just expressed that we missed the mark, it sounded to me like you asked the exact same question. So I'm not really getting how we missed the mark from
it's
you.
With the
I
pivoting,
think I
telling me like that I
no
should
I
pivot
yeah
away from.
I will. Yeah, I would like to go, and thank you, Arden. And I now that I know that you're an athlete and you're advocating for yourself, right? And which is
Yes,
something that is right. Okay, sorry. When I hear advocate, I hear like like I said, I've been touching grass for too long. I've been like working so much. It's fine. So please forgive me. So one of the things that I think is important here is whoever is challenging your status as a trans athlete, the first thing I would say is like, I'm not breaking any rules, right? I'm allowed to be here. Like I've already have been approved to play in this sport, right? And if you have a problem with it, deal with the adjudicators of the sport that allowed you to be able to participate in the first place. Because I think that's the first place to start. If you're already competing, you're already a participant in that activity, then you've already gone through the regulatory process that sports organization, or not just the sports organization that you're a part of. So
with
really,
the
and I think in those cases, you're there to play, right?
yeah okay
Oh,
well
go ahead.
all those organizations, they have no idea I'm a trans person. When I sign up, like I competed in the Pennsylvania pro am all women billiards pool competition last Saturday in Philadelphia. And I signed up. I played the competition. Not a single person there had any clue that I'm a transgender person. if they knew I was a transgender person, it might be different, me going into those competitions. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think the question is more around disclosure, right? And I think this is a very interesting point of view. I have never, and I'll just say I've never had a conversation, Brandy, with somebody who is going stealth and participating in sports. I think that's very interesting. I think it's a nuanced way to look at it. And if you do confront your sports organizations and decide to play openly, right? Play openly as a trans person, I think that those conversations would come up, or you may be pleasantly surprised. It'd be like, so, like,
Yeah.
so I think, and I think that you may give yourself peace of mind by being able to disclose that. I would definitely look at your regulations of your organization, sports organization that you're a part of, to see if they require any form of disclosure. And if they do, then I would be very curious to see how you would then proceed with that, because there is a power to playing openly, to being visible as an athlete, right? Because I think it brings up the question, when are trans people allowed to win? Right? It's like, are we only allowed to win if we're like stealthily not telling people our status of who we are? And I think that's a very nuanced way to look at it. So I'm not going to tell you to out yourself. I will tell you though that I would at least take a look at the regulations and see what is an idea. And if people do give you flack, there's tons of activist organizations out there that are willing to fight for you to make sure that you get the proper recognition that you deserve as an athlete that's worked very hard to be able to perform at the level that you do. And I want you to be respected and appreciated for that athleticism that you've been able to present as a person in this world. So yeah, that's a very tricky, nuanced situation, Brandy. And I'm really interested to see what decision you make on that, because yeah, it could be very scary, especially in this time right now, to be like, okay, I'm going to out myself as a professional transgender athlete. I can understand your hesitation to doing that. And I don't know what to say there, because it's your coming out, and it's how you decide to present as an out athlete.
Yeah. With Massachusetts Senior Games, I posted after I won 1 year. I posted with them, and they had no issues with me being trans. The other competitors didn't know. As far as the pool world, no one's ever asked me, so I never come out and say. It's not the first thing I'm going to introduce myself as a trans woman. I introduce myself as Brandy Beckett, and people never ask, so I tell them my identities.
Yeah, you have every right for that.
My name, Brandy Beckett, and my F as the sex on there. So I don't know what obligation do I have to tell, say, the pool world that I'm trans.
I don't think there's an obligation. I think that's a complex moral question, but no, I don't think there's an obligation. I think there's perhaps a urge from a lot of trans people to be more publicly out so that we can sort of engage in that sort of activism and normalization. But no, I don't think there's an obligation. And I think it's curious that, amongst the we can always tell and trans women have all these competitive advantages, that you're able to successfully compete stealth. But yeah, no, I don't think there's an obligation to out yourself per se.
Yeah, and I don't want you to lose your awards either, right? Like, let's say that your organization does require some form of disclosure and some type of medical certificate or something. They might be able to try to yank the hard work that you fought for. So I definitely highly recommend what the regulatory, they may not even have any regulatory standards of what they require for participation in that category. So if there is a trans disclosure requirement, like, oh, you need to do this or you need to show this certificate, you may want to do that because you may already meet those, which it sounds like you already meet those requirements anyway. You don't want to get your awards stripped from you, because that would be a bad story, right? Where it's like, oh, this trans person was outed and then she lost all of her trophies, and it's just like, right. So there is those type of blowbacks as well. So I truly believe you should look into what would happen if you actually disclose. And if it's nothing, who cares? Like if they don't have a provision in their rules and they don't have anything at all, then who cares? You could do what you want.
Oh, well, thank you, and I appreciate your thoughts on the issue. Y'all,
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
can you pin me back on with the call screener? I have a question about. I want to get to Jimmy.
Okay. Sure thing. I will return you to the queue. Screener, if you're watching, please pick Brandy up. Thanks, Brandy, and we'll talk to you later. A couple things I want to address before we move on. There was a call on the line who wanted to talk about defending Israel and being anti-Hamas. I want to be clear that that was brought up in relation to how an elected candidate would affect trans people within the U.S. The only topics we accept here are topics that are related to trans people. We have lots of shows that address political issues. If you would like to talk about your position on the Israel-Palestine conflict, you're going to take it there because we're not going to take that call here.
No.
Yeah. Also, nope, I lost what the second thing was. So we're just going to move on and take the next call. We've got Louise in Texas. She, her pronouns, wants to talk about transgender issues in Texas. Louise, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Oh, hi. This is
Hi.
Louise Richardson. I'm a longtime listener, the first time calling in.
Oh,
And I
Louise,
have
real quick.
no
I'm sorry to interrupt.
problems whatsoever. I'm turning down the...
Okay,
Here, wait, let me
you got it.
turn the
Thanks,
thing
you
here.
knew. Thank
Here we
you.
go.
Go on.
Yeah, no, I have no problems at all, but I understand you needed callers. But beyond that, I would like to ask how things are now with, like, getting, birth certificates changed and all that sort of thing. I transitioned back in the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
September 19th, 1977. I had my gender trans. I don't even know what to call it anymore. Anyway, I had my gender surgery, and it was in San Francisco. And it was really strange. In San Francisco in those days, it was like the rest of the world is now. You could get your driver's license changed in California. I got my Social Security card changed, and everything was fine until I got back to Texas a couple of years later. And I was afraid to go forward with my birth certificate because I didn't want to go to some redneck judge and then have the whole thing put in a local newspaper somewhere. So I put it off for like 40 years, and things started loosening up in this century. So I tried to. I talked. There was a legal clinic at the University of Texas in Austin, and I went there, and I told them my situation. They looked into it. They said, "Well, we can't help you right now because you have to prove who you were before, and your driver's license says you're female, and all that sort of thing now." And so I went to the same clinic the next year, same problem. Finally, I got in touch with a local law office, and they eventually were able to help me. I didn't even have to go before a judge.
That's great.
And got it taken care of finally. And this was 2019. And then, of course, COVID hit. But just before then, I had my birth certificate changed, and I used that, and I got a passport because I lived part of the time in Galveston. So I thought, I'll take one of these cruise ships to the Bahamas or something sometime. And then, of course, COVID hit and kind of went out the window. So I'm just wondering, I was just in time to get all this done. Is that still an easy or a possible thing to do now in the state of Texas for those who might be going through this?
Yeah, it's definitely doable. I will say I lived in Rhode Island before I moved to Texas, and the process in Rhode Island is like a million times easier than it is in Texas. But honestly, I don't think that's necessarily because of Texas having difficult laws on changing things, especially in Austin. Most of the judges are super easygoing and like they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, sign that paper, get it all over with. But it's because if you are familiar, Louise, with the Texas, so it's the DPS in Texas, even though it's the DMV in every other state. You have to schedule out appointments like 6 months in advance to like get an appointment in the city. That was the barrier that I found, was that just getting an appointment to even get this stuff on the roll took a really long time. But
well, luckily, I was able to
easy.
get my California driver's license back then and had no trouble getting the Texas driver's license with my name and gender marker. I was just wondering, because of our state government now, which is, kind of like your typical authoritarian type of government, if they're putting any pressure on legal matters like that.
I don't know that they're necessarily putting pressure. I know there was some fear that the Attorney General got a list of all of the people in the last like so many years who had applied for a gender marker change. And so some people were a little bit concerned about, why are you doing that? What are you going to do with that information? I mean, like, I remember that I would have fallen in the category of the years of people who applied for that in Texas. So, I mean, there are like concerns, obviously, when you have a government like we have of what they're going to do. But I will say, as of right now in Texas, while the culture is certainly still awful, especially in the rural areas, Austin is wonderful. I think Dallas is pretty
sanctuary
great.
city.
Yeah, and the legal stuff is, while it's definitely more difficult than some of our more progressive states, it's really not that bad, actually. I think it's pretty doable to get everything done. It's just like I was saying, when I was in Rhode Island, literally all I had to do was show up at the DMV and just put female on the page rather than male, and that was all I had to do. Whereas in Texas, I actually have to fill out a form, send it in, to like the appellate court or whatever, and have a judge look at it and sign it. Then I can take that to the DMV and get my stuff. So it is like a little bit more. There's more hoops to jump through, but it's not exactly difficult, and they're not like stringent with their rules.
That's good to know for people who are about to go through that.
Certainly.
So there's a great resource. It's at transequality.org/documents. And it actually has a database of every single state in the United States on how to change your IDs. So you can just, like I said, it's transequality.org/documents. That will actually, start you somewhere. Now, talking about the laws themselves, right? Right now, we are seeing a backlash of a lot of ID laws that are starting to get into place where they're actually trying to reverse name changes. Like in the state of Florida, they're actually trying to reverse name changes, which is like out of control, and reverse gender markers. And there are some states that are currently trying to make it illegal to actually change vital records, your birth certificates. So it is extremely terrifying for a lot of trans folks that we may lose the ability to change our documents. So I highly recommend, for any trans people that are watching right now, if you have not changed your IDs, do that as soon as possible, because you could live in a state that may change how those things are even done, raise the price, raise the thresholds of the documents that you need. There are so many things that could possibly happen. So please, please, please get that stuff done. Don't procrastinate. This is not the time to do that. But I really appreciate, Luis, you checking in on that, because your instincts are right. It is difficult. And I was actually looking at the Texas documents while you were chatting, because I haven't even changed my birth. I'm like chatting about, no, change your records. I haven't even done Texas yet myself. So it's definitely something that is quite important, and we should never forget it. So no, thank you for the call, and thank you for being visible in our community for so long.
I definitely have to say,
well,
you and there's a creator.
I'm not visible.
Still, though, you're living your best life, and we're very happy for you.
I am.
Louise, I gotta say,
and, I understand both of you are in Texas right now. Are you both in Austin?
No, well, I'm in Austin. Josie, you is from Texas, right? But you're in DC.
Texas.
Yeah.
I'm in the DC area. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought this would be a good time for me to call in, because I'm in Lago Vista, which is at the hill country near Austin.
Yep.
Because there's not enough Texas representation today, so I thought that I would complete it.
Awesome. Well, it was really lovely to hear from you. I really appreciate. I know there's like another creator. I think she goes to like Marty Pants or something, who started her transition around the 70s as well. And it's like, that's really cool for me to hear, because I think so often the trans representation we get are young people who are like 3, 4, 5 years into transition, and it's really nice to know that like trans people can live a life that's longer than 5 years, like transition is bigger than that.
I'm 75 and healthy and still going strong. So
genuinely makes
awesome.
Me so full of hope. Yeah, thank you, Louise. I really appreciate hearing.
Hey, Louise, I have a question
welcome.
for you. I have a quick question for you. Did you take the U.S. transgender survey last year? Did you hear about it?
I don't know. I don't think I did.
Okay, good to know. I was curious, because that was one of the demographics I was shooting for our trans elders.
Yeah, I should have if it came my way. I should have.
Yeah, it's just I was just checking my math to see if I had good outreach, and apparently
Maybe
I need to get better.
It seems like I filled out something like that.
Okay, was it an hour-long survey about your life?
No.
Okay, yeah, you didn't do it.
That's all right.
Keep out on the lookout for later. But no, I really appreciate it. I was just very curious. I just wanted
my
to
life it would take longer than an hour.
Oh goodness. Oh, you're so sweet, Luis. Well, thank you for the call.
Thank you for indulging me.
Of course.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day, Luis. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Again, that just talking to trans people who are like older than 30 makes me so happy.
Our trans
sometimes.
Elders.
Yeah,
I'm older than 30.
Okay. Fair.
I'm about to be 38. Like,
I was being hyperbolic. Okay. My point is that like I don't know, so much of the representation is like really just like younger trans people, or trans people are only a couple years into transition. And to hear someone who's like they transitioned in the 70s, like that's so many years into transition. That's really awesome. Cool. And a reminder that like you do have a life ahead of you, your life isn't like a set on a doomed course or whatever. I've never been graceful at talking about the age thing. I'm so clumsy. But that's all right. We're going to take our next caller.
I know, I'm almost 40. It hits different.
Dylan in Florida. We know Dylan. Dylan's calling in. Dylan, what do you want to talk about?
Sorry, I had you on speaker.
No worries. What's up?
So my topic is more about how it's more anecdotal, but sort of about how for a good couple of trans masc folks and trans guys in general, how we sort of enter a stage of like toxic masculinity early into our transition. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of trans masc friends in high school, and it was almost like a character arc we all had to go through in experiencing just that dude bro, we gotta be more masculine, gotta hang out with all my like cis guy friends, trying to be almost more guy than I actually really am. And thankfully, a lot of my friends went through this arc with me of, actually, I'm a guy, who the fuck cares? And started dressing more feminine because honestly, being comfortable in my masculinity helped me realize I actually do enjoy a lot of feminine things. Like, I love crop tops. I like nail polish a little bit because sometimes the sensation gets to me, but just sort of this character arc. And I'm sort of curious if for trans feminine people, if you guys have a similar thing that's ever happened where you try to be more hyper feminine or try to conform into femininity more than you necessarily would have just as your personality. And whenever you have been in transition for so long, you finally just like, you know what, I kind of like just whatever. And sort of, if you had something similar happen with you guys.
Oh yeah. I feel like, yeah, I feel like this is like a somewhat universal trans experience. Like the desire to at first overexpress, you know, the identity you're trying to express, because like, you know, early on, a lot of people, you know, you're maybe don't pass as well or whatever. So you're, I mean, and that's not everyone's goal. So that's kind of irrelevant, but like you overexert yourself because you want people to be like, oh, that's a girl, or that's definitely not a boy, or, you know, whatever. And then I think, like, honestly, one of the better things about transition is when you hit the point where you're comfortable with yourself and your own identity and you can finally like settle back into feeling normal. Like today, I don't have any makeup on. My hair is a total mess and I'm wearing pajamas. Like, honestly, when we started this show like 2 years ago, you would have never seen me show up to the show without makeup on. Like my brow's not done. Never. Would have never happened. And I do think like as time goes on, you get more comfortable. You just kind of are like, actually, you know what? I don't have anything to prove to anyone. So why am I trying so hard? Like I can just kind of settle in and relax. Like it's going to be okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty universal trans experience.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm gonna name drop, but I was having this exact conversation with Angelica Ross, like literally like a few days ago. I know I'm name dropping because I love her. Anyways, we were talking about how we all kind of like start in the hyper, especially for our binary trans siblings, right? Like, you know, we kind of don't want to be perceived, like, for example, like I was talking to Arden before this call or before this show today, and I was like, I need to go throw on some makeup, and I was like really light makeup, which meant foundation, eyeliner, and an eyebrow pencil. And I'm starting to just do that more than I've ever done before, because before I would do the eyeshadow, I would do the blush, I would do the lipstick, I would make sure I was flawless. And now I'm just like, I only go flawless if I'm like presenting an award or going to an event or going to somewhere like, you know, in that realm. So I actually gave a presentation to the VA healthcare system earlier today without makeup. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And I don't, nobody can tell. It's fine. And so I think we all kind of do that. I think, you know, as trans people, we have that latent puberty, I think, a lot of times where, you know, when you're a teenager, we have more ability to play around with femininity, masculinity, you know, and we can kind of figure out before we get into our adult years where we lie on that spectrum. And I think, you know, because a lot of us trans people go through puberty later in life, we have to do that teenage phase of like, oh, is glittery, you know, eyeliner what I need? Or should I go full face? Or should I do this with my hair? Or should I wear this type of dress? Like, it's just a lot of exploring. And then eventually you're just like, ugh, why am I doing this? Am I doing this for me? Or am I doing this for society around me just for a certain reason? So I think it's completely normal and healthy that we completely just create our own, or not create, but we land and discover where we are on the femininity, masculine spectrum, or anywhere between or outside of.
I think also it has to do with, for a lot of us, it's almost like we're experiencing our awkward teen phase later in life, because for a lot of us, we kind of went through the wrong puberty, in essence, and sort of just figuring out our own sense of style. Like I still, whenever I go into a hair salon, I'm like, just give me like an emo boy Justin Bieber haircut, because for me that's the comfiest I can be, and I usually pass more often if I have that sort of like emo swoop hair. But I've kind of started mellowing out a bit, where I let my hair kind of be semi more masked. This is the shortest I've ever had it, and more of a comfort level, just not even wearing my binder unless I'm at work.
Love
Mostly
it.
because it's on its left
Yeah.
leg, but also because I definitely, especially in high school, I would wear it the entire school day, even a couple hours. I would hang out with my friends after school, which you're not supposed to do this. It's a PSA. You're supposed to have 8 hours with breaks, max a day with a binder, just letting everyone know in case they didn't know that.
Mhm.
I didn't do that. Don't do that. Your back is not going to like you at 25.
Yeah,
Just warning everyone.
I think every trans guy I've ever known does that. And every trans guy I've
Yeah.
ever known, once they get top surgery, is like, I really shouldn't have done that. That was such a mistake. I'm
Oh, yeah.
suffering the consequences. Yeah, but I think it's
I'm
absolutely
so
true.
scared to get a consultation, man.
There's definitely such an experimental stage when you're early in transition. Because, I mean, one thing I thought about often is that, like, a lot of my female peers in my age range, right? They have a wardrobe and jewelry and stuff that they've been building up literally their whole life. And when you're trans, you throw everything out and you have to, like, well, not everyone does that, but like you're kind of starting from scratch at, an adult age or whatever for a lot of us. And it's like you do exactly that awkward stage where you're like, how does this work? I'm going to wear this out and see how I feel. And like, it's just kind of how it is. There's no real way to like test your style without just putting something on and going out in public and seeing how you feel about it. And sometimes, almost inevitably, you're gonna look back on, in 3 years and be like, wow, that was so cringe. I can't believe I wore that. But at the same time, it's like, but I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now if I didn't try that out, like, and find out that wasn't for me. And like, this other thing is actually for me. And so I don't know. It's like, you got to embrace the cringe. Everyone is cringe, right? And we all got to go through it. And it's like, I know it puts a lot of people off, the fear of being like not stylish or not passing or not looking pretty enough or not really having a style or whatever. But you're not going to find the style until you trip on your face and wear something that makes you feel kind of silly. And you're like, well, I know it's definitely not that.
Yeah. Even for me, I got lucky because I've always been like a quote unquote tomboy and worn just graphic tees and jeans and stuff. But having a sense of style, I feel like I'm starting to even branch out now, wearing like a mesh shirt that I got to wear at the furry convention and just comfy black jeans that match and stuff like that. Or even color coordinating my outfits now. Because I found I like wearing one solid color, even though lately most of my life it's always been just black. But branching out to greens, so where is that?
I always thought that's funny how like the peak masculinity is like looking like complete ass. I'm like, that's not peak masculinity. Like, like you can look good and be masculine. I think it's so funny that's perception. It's like me as a woman who's also attracted to masculine people. It's like I'm like, I want you to look kind of like clean and cut and like it's just like have a sense of style. I just don't get it. But no, I'm glad you're really coming to who you are. It's always such I think it's like that level of like we just like it's like we just get it. It's like the light bulb comes on. It's like, oh, this is what I want to look like when I go out in public. I think it's a really cool feeling. I definitely know exactly what you mean. And I was just thinking of my coming out photo, just like so cringe. Oh my God. I wish it didn't exist. And like now,
oh my God.
and because like you look at that versus now, I'm just like that human isn't even me at all anymore. Like,
right.
It's so funny.
I will say, I admire trans people who can post more of their timelines than I am not that brave. I'm like, nope, those pictures can burn away in the depths of time. Cause like, I cringe too hard. And I'm like, look, I don't mind if I cringe, but I can't let everyone else cringe at me. Yeah, no, it happens. But yeah, I think, I think every trans person has to go through this sort of experience. It's just part of the journey of figuring out who you are and experimenting and you're kind of starting over your life in a sense, and so it's going to require a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm excited for your
you, guys.
up.
Thanks, Dylan. Love to hear from you as you slowly convert me more and more into a furry.
Sorry. I realize that you follow me as well. I apologize for my timeline.
It's all right.
Oh,
It's all right. Talk to you later, Dylan.
Bye.
No, it's funny. My profile picture on Twitter is me in a Sonic cosplay, and like I was like, I kind of love those automated furry tails, and the people are like, kind of becoming a furry. And then I did a picture in like one of those cow costumes, and they're like, you're not beating the furry allegations now. So I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. All right, we've got one call left for the day. I'm gonna close the lines, and we're gonna talk to sorry, I'm totally gonna butcher this pronunciation. Mukund in India, pronouns are he, him, wants to talk about presentation versus self-ID. How did I do on pronunciation? Is it Mukund?
Yeah, Mukund.
I got the wrong one. All right, what do you want to tell us, what you want to talk about from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So I'm cis. So I don't. If any of what I say sounds transphobic, I'm very sorry about that. I'm just trying.
No worries.
Okay. So my question is, so like, if like to me, right, the presentation, like the gender presentation, seems like more signifying of the gender identity itself, because like if you say you're a man and you like outwardly, I guess, don't look like a man, and I mean not like the muscles type, but like maybe like the shirts, something. So what does it even mean to be a man? At that point, I feel like gender becomes like something that's just like a word that has no meaning.
Well, I don't think so. Also, I'm gonna ask if you have like a headset on. Could you check that the plug is like plugged in all the way? Because there's like a crackling that sounds like maybe your headphones are just like slightly undone.
Yeah, I can't do anything. I don't know. So does it sound any better now?
It's no big deal. I just wanted to see if we could fix it. The web caller sometimes has issues like this.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you're stumbling on is the fact that words and set theory, like categories, the concept of categories, are inherently flawed. And this kind of relates to what I was saying earlier about how things that might be true of a population aren't necessarily true of individuals within the population, right? Like, I don't particularly object to the notion of like adult female human being like a term for women. But then we have to talk about what those individual words mean, because like, does female mean a person who has large mobile gametes? Because what about cis women who are born without ovaries? That's the thing that happens.
No, I get
and those are still
fact.
women.
That's why I said.
Right?
That's why I said presentation instead of anything else.
Sure. But
like, to me, someone who looks like a woman, like sounds more like, okay. So I see that you look like a woman and you identify as a woman. Okay, fine. That makes more sense than let's say if we consider like being like a. In India, cricket is pretty famous. So you say you're a fan of the Indian team, and you don't know like any of the players that are playing. It just seems like you're just saying stuff.
I get what you're saying. The reason I went in the direction I went is because I was trying to do. Sorry, it's probably an annoying. It's probably a bit of an annoying way that I just kind of handle things. But I was trying to make a roundabout point where I'm saying like, so we're acknowledging that categories are inherently flawed, right? And there are going to be people who, within those categories, who probably don't technically fit the definition, but clearly from every like measurable standard are within that category. They just don't necessarily fit the definition. I mean, like this happens with like mom. Like there are stepmoms, there are like adopted moms, there are, like your aunt might raise you and you kind of consider her your mom. Like these categories are like inherently flawed. And then when we talk about like presentation, like I know tons of like what you might call femboys, cis men who present so hyper feminine that a random person walking down the street might assume that that person's a woman, but they are a man. They're a cis man. They've been a man their whole life. They identify as a man. So it's kind of like, I understand what you're saying, and I completely agree that I don't think we can fault people for accidentally misgendering someone based on presentation, as long as they're cool with being corrected and they're like a normal, chill human about it. But it doesn't mean that like that person, you know, even if their presentation might conflict with what you think a man or a woman is, that they're not in that category. I've known a couple of trans men who just kind of were in a situation where access to care wasn't either available, or maybe there were some health conditions preventing them from accessing the specific things that they would really like to feel good in their bodies. And then they just kind of came to the conclusion, you know what? Fuck it. I'm a man regardless of whether I have access to care or not. And it's not my fault that I don't have access to care. So why should I be ashamed of my body just the way that the way that it happened to be, you know, through nature? And I don't think that those people are not men because they weren't able to change their body to conform to societal standards, right? So it's like, I get what you're saying, and I think it's, again, perfectly fine that if
No, in that
somebody's
case,
out in
right,
public...
what does it even mean to be a man?
So can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I want to take a step back, right? Because I want to make sure that the scenario that you're talking about is a very rare one, right? Like, so you know, when you're walking through the world and you run into somebody and they're like, actually, I'm a woman, or actually, I'm a man, right? That's pretty much the end of the conversation, right? It's or it's already like, okay, I'll go ahead and deal with this with who you are, and making sure I correct myself to make sure that I'm abiding for that. So first and foremost, it's about making sure we respect the other human on the other side, right? Because regardless of like the nuance and the philosophical meaning of like what is a man, what is a woman, and I think that's what Arden was talking about when you're talking about categorization, right? So like, what is a table, what is a chair, like, you know, there is a lot of that type of conversation. It just gets more tricky when you're talking about human beings, right? When you're talking about humans, right, there are so many ways people can define themselves in the spectrums of whatever they feel. And unless you're in their head, there's no way for you to kind of like understand where that person lies on that spectrum. Because I think that we get wrapped around the idea is like, well, what if somebody's trans and they're a trans woman, but they don't want to grow their hair out, or if they can't make it easier for me to tell, right? And I think the best thing you can do is kind of take yourself out of it a little bit, right? And not think about this person is presenting for me so I can be able to gender them properly in the way that makes sense. It's about meeting people and talking to people in a way that it doesn't really matter. Right. So like if I'm talking to a human and I don't know what their pronouns are, I'm not even going to assume who I'm talking to unless I ask. I ask people who look incredibly masculine and people who look incredibly feminine what your pronouns are. Right. Because sometimes I'll get, oh, I'm actually non-binary. Thanks for asking. Right. And then I'm like, okay, great. And I can like move forward from that point of view. I think that the thing, and you're in India, right? So it's a situation where culture across the world is still coming around to the idea that trans people exist, and you're asking a question that is valid, which is like, well, trans people exist, but what kind of trans people exist? Because people still don't know us yet a lot of times, right? And I know that India has a very large trans community, and I also know that that trans community is also very hyper feminine or very hyper masculine because of society, and it's just safer, right? And now we're coming out in a situation, right? You know what I mean? It's just safer, right? To be able to present a certain way, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be able to do this. And I understand how that could come across of like, but if you don't look like a woman and you look like a man, isn't that dangerous? Shouldn't you try harder to like present? And it's really not our decision to be able to tell somebody to be a certain way. And we also have to remember about the fact that there is sexual orientation, like what type of gender or sex you're attracted to. There is your birth sex, like so what genitals or what, or if you're intersex. then there is gender presentation, right? Do you present masculine or feminine, in between, or neither? Then there is your actual gender identity of what you internally are. So, I'm sure in India there are many women who are very masculine, and there's many men that are very feminine, right? But that doesn't change their gender identity, right? I feel like the question comes
Okay,
up when it's a
in that
trans
case,
person.
can
Go
I
ahead.
interrupt 1 second?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in that case, I think I don't know. I'm not watching the show. So one of you made the comparison with like mothers, maybe, right? There could be an adopted mom, something like that. That in that case, let's say there is a parent who does not do the needful for the child. Everybody who knew their story of the parent and child would be like, yeah, technically they are the parent, but they don't deserve to be called that. But in case of gender, it seems like we are defining what it means to be the category. So I'm just getting a little confused. Like, is there a better allegory or better comparison with something else? Because in case of a sports team also, like having the label of a parent would apply to the like similarly with the sports fan thing, right? Where like you can call yourself you're a fan of the Indian team, but like if you don't, it's arbitrary, but still if you don't act like one, you don't get treated like one, right?
Sure. So Mukund, this is kind of the reason that I went the direction I did at the beginning, because like I agree with you. There are exceptions to rules and categories and definitions, and that makes you go, well, then what even is a sports fan? What even is a parent? What even is a man?
Yeah.
But the problem is that this is just how definitions work. I don't think the definition of man has to change, or the definition of woman has to change, or sports fan or parent. It's just that we acknowledge that there are exceptions to pretty much every single rule, and that just because I don't necessarily think that somebody or something fits within my definition of chair, or my definition of sports fan, or my definition of parent, or my definition of man, doesn't necessarily mean that they're using those same definitions, and that we are kind of collectively, with our individual models of the world, coming to certain agreements about what those words mean. And they're really broad summations. Like, I appreciate what you're trying to get at, which is like, if man isn't having a penis, if man isn't having an XY chromosome, if man isn't having small mobile gametes, then what is a man? And I think the problem is,
no, I'm not trying
you don't
to make
have
it
to
about the sex itself, but you get the point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get, it's just we keep coming back to the same thing, and I think it's the same answer every time, where it's like, I appreciate what you're getting at. Categories are inherently flawed, and it feels like maybe sometimes that like words don't have meaning because there are exceptions to definitions of words, and that can feel kind of like frustrating or disorienting, I think, when people first sort of encounter this like philosophical concept of like set theory and how nothing really works the way you want it to perfectly, right? No words perfectly encompass things the way that we treat them in reality. But it's just a fact that while, I appreciate that not every man's going to fit into the definition, then you're like, well, what even is a man? Well, I don't think really a definition of man has changed. It's just that this is how the world works. Definitions are imperfect.
I cannot pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. How do you say your name? Mukund? Mukund? Okay, thank you so much. I have a question for you. Mukund, are you a man?
I'm a man.
You are a man. Okay. Does this sentence make sense? A man is Mukund. Does that sentence make sense?
No, because not every man is Mukund, right?
But you are, though, right? So you told me you're a man, right? So my sentence, a man is Mukund, is accurate, right? And the only way I know that is accurate is because you told me, right? So that's the problem with language, right? Because I can identify a man, which is you, right? And I can now go to all different men all over the place who say they're men and be like, okay, Mukund's a man, Matt's a man, like, you know, Dylan is a man, and I can like start saying, okay, all these people are men, right? So now I can then say, okay, so I have a general idea of who men are, and I think that is a better way of looking at it than actually trying to guess for yourself, right? Because it's easier for me to be like, Makun's a man, so I don't really need to know any more than that, right? I don't need to know the definition. I don't need you to prove to me that you're a man in any way whatsoever, because you told me that. So when you say, what is a man? I would say you are, right? And however that shows up for you is what it is. And I can never argue differently, because who you are is a man. And so if you take it from that point of view and start from the internal person instead of trying to like impose manhood on someone else, I think that would take you further, right? Because I would never
Right.
argue with
Got
you
it.
and say you're not a man. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it can make sense.
Because it would
I'll
be
revisit
upsetting.
this and,
It would,
get some more
wouldn't
clarity
it?
on this.
Yeah, because it would be upsetting if I said, no, you're not. You're not a man. You don't like football, or you don't like cricket. You're not a man. What are you talking about? That would offend you, right? That would be a really annoying thing for me to say, right?
Yeah, who said a man
So
has
so
like
it's
football? Yeah.
exactly, right? So
Yeah.
that's the same situation for another person who's trying to tell the world who they are. So the best thing that we can
Right.
do is just say, okay, great. Because it's better to argue. It's not better to argue. It's better just to be in community with other humans.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Right.
Exactly.
Uh,
There's no value
yeah,
in
yeah.
arguing like what
Can
exactly
I ask
is a
one
man
more
or
question?
woman. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. So what would you tell someone who like argues that being some sort of queer person is just an anomaly from human behavior and it should not be like considered seriously?
Not be considered. Can you say
Say
the
that
last
one
part
more
again?
time.
Should not be considered what?
Sorry?
Can you just repeat?
Say that one more time. We missed you. We missed
Yeah.
the question. I missed the question.
No, I'm
Go
saying
ahead.
like what would you say to someone who considers like mainly trans and intersex identities to be some sort of an anomaly and should not be like considered as like within the general definition of things, or how we make rules and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I mean,
Like saying that like these things are like genetic, some kind of defects, sort of way.
sure.
Like
Yeah.
what would you say to them?
I think I mean, it might be even true that trans people are a statistical anomaly. We are an astronomically low part of the general population, but like, so are redheaded people, and so are people with schizophrenia, and we still accommodate them because we're a collective society. And we found that when we give people access to the treatments to have the best quality of life possible, that those people thrive and then offer society maybe like, it's kind of like the notion of like, oh, hold on, I'm going to back off from the analogy I was going to use, and I'm going to pivot to a different analogy because I think it'll be less problematic. Like, if they're a trans person, right, who might have like been really depressed, so depressed that they committed suicide because they lived in a society that didn't offer them, validation or treatment, or didn't follow the evidence according to like trans healthcare or whatever. But that trans person actually had the knowledge within their brain to cure pancreatic cancer. All of society benefits from us improving the quality of life of the entire population, because if that person survives, they then get to go on to study, find the cure to pancreatic cancer, and give that to all of society. Like, we benefit when we make sure that every human has the best quality of life possible to give them. And I mean, I think that's kind of the model that like we operate on, right? We don't talk about it. And like some people explicitly will define themselves as like, I would consider myself a humanist. And that I would say like, that's like the value of, I want as many humans to have as much flourishing as possible and to reduce suffering as much as possible. That's kind of like my moral, ethical operating system that I use. But I think we kind of all sort of use that in society. It doesn't always work in every situation, or it doesn't always show up in every law and every situation, but that's kind of the idea, right? So like, it's true. Trans people are a statistical anomaly, but like lots of things are anomalies, and we benefit from treating all of those people like humans and giving them all access to dignity and respect and the ability to live their life to the fullest. I don't think we have to deny a
Makes a lot of
statistical
sense.
anomaly to
Yeah. Thank you so
advocate for
much.
human rights.
I love the show. I watch the line frequently, and you guys are doing great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Mukund. Thanks for calling
Yeah,
in.
thank you for being candid and having this great conversation.
Bye. I think it's really cool. We have actually a significant portion of our audience is in India. We have quite a few callers from India that are regular.
That's awesome.
It's so cool. It's not something that I ever would have. We started the show like never in my life would I be like, oh yeah, we have a significant audience in India and they call in all the time. I'd be like, what? That's crazy. That to reach people across the globe, caring about these issues. It's really cool. But that was, hold on, I got to close out call in studio so I don't waste Jimmy's money. That was all of our calls for the day. So we are going to move on to our super chat portion of the day. If you would like us to read your super chat live on air right now, send in a super chat of $5 or more and it will get filtered into my little system here. If you do your membership super chat, my system can't pick that up. And if you do a sticker only, my system also can't pick that up. So send us text in a normal super chat and you will get it read live on air. But we're going to move on to super chats. You ready, Josie?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh,
you know, and just to go back real quick about, you know, the Indian population, the Hajara or Hajara is like a really heavy population in India that are basically like trans intersex women in particular that actually have a lot of visibility. They actually help a lot of people in need. They're very big community support. They do a lot of direct support. So India has had, you know, a very long history of like people that are trans, especially with eunuchs and things like that. So yeah, I love to see that more Indian callers are calling because the population is so large and there are definitely more Indian trans people than American trans people. So I love that the conversation is growing.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It also goes to show, you know, when people are like, trans issues, you know, were invented in 2015. It's like, no, gender diversity has been a part of the human experience in multiple cultures for like literally all of humanity. So just because it wasn't in your sphere, your, you know, white American cis het sphere until 2015 doesn't mean it didn't exist. Anyway, we've got super chats. So I'll kick it off. We've got $5 from Melissa Nguyen. Fermat's last theorem, no three positive integers, a, b, and c, satisfy the equation a to the nth power plus b to the nth power equals c to the nth power for any integer value of n greater than 2. Hashtag team RC div.
Yeah, because we were both reactor operators in the Navy.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Got it. That's
reactor
for
controls
you.
division.
I don't have oh God.
She's my sister, Alyssa.
So we changed the whole system like a month or two ago, and I have not got the point system up and functioning yet. But hold on, let me take a second, and I'm gonna try to get this going so we can have points again because I've been neglecting to get it done because I usually rush production at the beginning of the show. And okay, so that's all good. Can I? Here, I'm going to send the next one. You can read it, and then I will try to get that on the screen. Oh, there it is, but can I move it? Yeah, let's get it like...
Yay!
There. And I'll have to enter the points manually because I don't have the shortcuts yet. I know, I'm the worst. Tell me about it, chat. There we go. Okay. You want to read this one?
Yes, but I can't read the name because you put the scoreboard over the name.
I think it's at the top too, but I can...
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it does. It says, sorry, don't worry about it. Leave it the way it is. Yeah, $5 from Samantha Shepard. Keep up the great work. Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. I know, Dylan, I'm the worst. I see the chat. Sorry. 4.99 from Louise Richardson. It's the Trans Texas Call-in Show. Hashtag Team Josie this week. That's right.
Yay.
You know, Texas is rough for sure. I got to admit though, I love Austin, and I actually really like the community that I'm a part of. I mean, we do like snake breeding and stuff, and so we go to expos all the time, and like I love the people that I meet. Like I'm not exactly stealth. I don't like, if somebody asked me, I would say it, but I don't like broadcast I'm trans on like the banner or anything. And so I don't know how many people know in that community, but everyone's been like so kind and so sweet, and everyone seems pretty much kind of politically left. So I don't know. Texas, it has its good parts, despite being probably, if you grew up in the rural area, I can totally see why you might be
I'm
like, I want to
dreading
move
Christmas.
Texas. Yeah.
I'm going back to Christmas. I haven't. My first Christmas as being fully out as Josie, so I'm
wow.
not looking forward to it. I've actually was super stressed yesterday. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to have conversations. Yeah, it's frustrating. But anyways,
Yeah, I totally get that. That makes sense.
All right, $10 for Miss Seaside Hill Granny. Okay, so I called like almost crying on the show, but I managed to get my health insurance back and start HRT again. I am so lucky that I'm 23 and did not really develop that much into a man. Well, I'm so happy for you, Miss Seaside Hill. It's so great. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, I'm glad you got your HRT back. Healthcare is very frustrating in this country. I finally got healthcare for 2024 starting on January 1st. It's the first time in like 3 years I've had healthcare, and I have dental and vision. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be so healthy by the end of this year.
Yay! The little things. Basic
It is
health.
the little things. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. I might add that I was in Zoom meetings with doctors at the UTMB in Galveston this year about how to deal with trans patients. So I hope that helped. That's awesome.
Oh,
no, that's so good.
Awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
$5 from Arbery. Other than snakes, what critters would you want to breed for fun? Hashtag Team Josie. I don't know if these count as critters, but I would love to breed like birds. I don't know what it is about that. I want parrots. I want them to be smart and dance for me.
Birds are amazing. Let me give you that point. I want to go grab my geckos. 1 second.
Show and tell. I love geckos. When I was a
critters.
Yeah.
That is a little baby crested gecko.
So cute.
It is well, I don't like to talk about crested gecko genetics because it's not like snakes where it's like, oh, it has this specific gene. And people like to pretend it's that, but it's really kind of just like, this is how it looks to me. So his parents are beautiful. He's beautiful. Can't wait till he gets bigger. I would also really, really love to breed emerald tree skinks. That is like a dream of mine. They're so amazing. They're little green lizard puppies, and they're perfect. Is this you or me? Okay, $20 from Larry Fishman. Is it possible for HRT to change a trans girl's hair color from a dignified dark brown to platinum blonde? I have blonde hairs erupting from my scalp. Hashtag Team Josie for showing me it was okay to start transitioning at 34.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. Oh, Larry, you're awesome.
I don't think that's how HRT works. I don't know what's happening to you, but
I have heard that hair lightens, or darkens. So I don't know. What's so interesting about hormones is they're idiosyncratic, right? Mm-hmm. It affects everybody differently. So it wouldn't surprise me if you had something that changed something, but I don't think it's the norm, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. What happened?
I'll tell you.
To your skin?
I started getting gray hairs around the time I started HRT. I'm 27, almost 28, but I have quite a few gray hairs. So I'm just saying, before you think they're platinum blonde, maybe investigate, because I got them early, but I think like around there is a normal age to start getting gray hairs. Maybe later. I don't know. Maybe I'm aging too quickly. Dear.
No, you're not. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Great show, ladies. As a member of the worst sexuality gender combo, I throw this as my weekly penance for my cishet boys. Where's the problem? Hashtag Team Josie. Let's go.
Nice. I also saw Dylan in chat talking about the Florida dude who goes into the Everglades barefoot to like grab invasive species and try to rehome them, or like, unfortunately, sometimes the laws state that you have to turn them over to the Florida Wildlife Department and they might have to kill them because Florida is full of invasive species, and unfortunately there's just like no other solution in a lot of ways. It's really sad, but I have seen that guy though. Barefoot in the swamp is so crazy. I've seen him grab like water moccasins and shit, and it's like, I know they are like the most docile venomous species, but can we not grab extremely venomous species on camera and teach people that that's normal? Because you should not do that literally ever. Like, doesn't matter how docile they are, they could kill you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then $5 from Laser Lizard Arden. I just got my first snack recently, a cute pink baby corn. Any advice for a new snack mom? Definitely, if you only have one, socialize it a lot. I mean, that's how you get snakes that can be held by like, children and be totally fine. I will tell you, I really struggle with baby corns, getting them to eat. And assist feeding is not a fun experience. So I hope that you got one that's already on food and doesn't have to be assist fed, because it's really just not a fun time to try to force an animal to eat food when they don't want to. But if you don't, they die. So it's like, oh, it's not good. Corns are really hard to get on food for some reason. They're like that. But I hope yours is great and is eating on its own, and we'll have a nice
And
lawn.
you get a point.
Oh yes, oh my god, I finally got a point. Thank you, somebody cares about me. The points don't pop off the way they used to anymore, but to be fair, it's because we were kind of failing to deliver on the punishments, so people were kind of
I didn't owe somebody a punishment. I think I owe everybody a punishment, but I never came on for a double. So I think I owe you a punishment, but I can't remember what it is.
I literally don't even know anymore. We've been like kind of like spitballing about ways to like kind of, encourage people to send super chats, but like actually deliver them something. We tried to talk about TikToks for a while, like make people do like little shorts for us. But nobody wanted to do that either. I thought that would be really easy, but like then they kind of became like, you have to do a TikTok dance. And then people were like, I'm not going to do a fucking TikTok dance. And so it was like, all right. So,
yeah. So $10 from Alex Rosas. Been a fan for a bit, and my egg cracked a few months ago. I had my first round of LHR to get ahead, and when I'm able to come out. So do y'all have any tips for handling LHR, Team Arden?
I don't know about handling it. For me, laser hair removal was like, I mean, it's painful, but I feel like I have a high pain tolerance, so I'm just kind of like, hit me with it. They're always like, are you sure you don't want to break? And I'm like, no, fucking power through the most painful areas. I will suffer, and then it'll be over. We can all go home. So like, I don't know. I think you can take Advil like an hour before, and I hear that helps, but I don't do that.
I cry like a baby. I scream. I demanded nitrous when they did my bottom, and the VA gave it to me, believe it or not. So I was like, I got nitrous as they were zapping me. I will say that it gets easier with time. The first couple hurt a lot because that's when the hairs are most dense. And I will always recommend get a full clear for like the 6, 7, 8 times recommended, and then clean everything else up with electrolysis. It takes forever, but it's gotten me results. It just takes a long time. It is, I think on a lot of trans femmes list overall, that laser hair removal is probably one of the worst things. I hate it every time, but it's worth it. But you know what's really frustrating is like all the people who do it to me, like, well, beauty is pain. I'm like, girl, you don't know this pain. It's like-
Yeah, I haven't done electrolysis, but I've definitely considered it because, like, my experience has been that I've done so many rounds of laser hair removal, way more than like 6 or 8 recommended or whatever. And like, there are just some areas where it's just like, like hair won't go for like a year, but then like a couple of
And then it comes
stray
back.
hairs will grow, and I'm like, what the fuck? So yeah, I think electrolysis might be a good way to clean up those last few stragglers.
Do it. It's worth it. Find a good electrolysis that you just do a weekly every 2 weeks. And just do
Yeah,
it.
that's a good idea.
Just do it.
We've got 120 check Karunas from Naresh. Showed up late and caught up only when the super chat started, and I didn't watch live last week, so now my check stacks. I still have my check stacks now, at least. Thank you very much, Naresh. I appreciate you always coming through with those check stacks for us. So that's what we jokingly call the currency, because
Got it.
yeah. Well, oh, we got one more. That was the last one, but Stephanie Helms came in. Show up on my system. There we go.
$4.99 from Stephanie Helms. Fine work on the sports calls. Josie, hashtag Team Josie. Thank you. Very happy to do it.
Yeah, you do very well on those calls. I think I'm too, like, you were talking about how, like, you know, you're a data girl, you're a stats girl, and I'm very much the same. And it's kind of hard for me to pull away from that sometimes, even when it is, like, strategically maybe not the best, because I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, it's better to acknowledge the bad parts of the stats, but then be like, but even from that model, even from your model, your conclusions aren't justified. But I do think that not everyone is like, a lot of the people that we're talking to aren't going to be like logic lords or whatever, and that's not going to compel them. And I think sometimes appealing more to those emotional pleas, the shared values, can be probably more effective at like political advocacy in that way. Naresh came through with another one.
And that was you.
Oh yeah, sorry. Another 120 check Krunas, check stacks from Naresh. Hashtag team lightsaber hair removal. Hey, if that worked, I would bury my face in a lightsaber. And I don't mean that as an innuendo.
And for that, you get $5 from Panda, hashtag Team Arden.
Hey, look, if I can get half as many points as Josie, I'm winning. All right. All right, everybody. And with that has been the end of our show. So thank you so much to Morgan for filling in on his call screener, and best wishes to our usual call screener, Jess. I know she had kind of an emergency issue she had to step away from. So I hope she's doing well. Thank you to all of the mods in chat. I see Alyssa, Stephanie, and I got cookies.
And we just got another super chat from Naresh for 120 check sex. Every super chat is the last one, at least for a while, until another one comes.
Yeah, you guys like to do that to us.
Yeah.
So Josie, did you want to like plug anything before we wrap up the show?
You know, honestly, I would normally plug my Twitch channel or whatever. I just haven't done that in months. So, you know, I will just plug my org. Just go visit transequality.org. We're doing a lot of really great work. We just had a 20-year anniversary. So we're still very happily accepting donations. We actually did really well, and we need more because of all the work that I'm doing. And I'll just tell you this, too. I am actually working as, you know, I'm also on the trans advisory committee for the DNC. We are actually currently working right now on getting a messaging guide that I'm actually leading on, trying to actually start getting real messaging guides to our politicians on how to deal with these sports questions, because there's just so much that needs to be said. And so we're creating trainings and PowerPoints and all of this stuff so we can actually like educate the Democratic Party as a whole on how to talk about issues such as sports, because Democrats, they go ghost white as soon as you say trans sports. They're just like, they don't know what to say because they're afraid of the polling. And it's just because they don't understand or have the messaging. So I'm really happy that I got to test some of the messaging here today to see how it worked out. And it seemed like it works. So we're going to keep going down that road.
Definitely. I'm firmly in the position that Josie is doing more for trans advocacy than literally anybody else on the planet. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. You're doing so much. We love having you here. Thank you guys for being here. We would be nothing without an audience to watch our little faces talk about these issues. So we'll be back next week with another episode with Katy and I. See you guys later.
Bye.
This is our Patreon producers.
I loved it.
I gotta tell you, my favorite patron name that's gonna scroll by is Worthless Protoplasm. That name just, it hits
Ooh, good
different.
name.
It's so good.
It does. Look at all these amazing humans. What a list. I love it.